B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Yoma Daf Nun Zayin. We're going to start 4 lines from the top of the Amud. Before we read the Gemara inside, let's have a brief recap on what we saw just in the previous Gemara. The Mishnah told us in Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis that after the Kohen Gadol had finished sprinkling from the blood of the bull in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, achas lemalo, sheva lemata, and also the same with the blood of the goat, he would then come out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and in the Heichal, he would do the same. He would sprinkle first achas lemalo, v'sheva lemata, towards the curtain of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then of the bull's blood, and then he would do the same with the blood of the goat. That's what we saw in the Mishnah on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. The Gemara on Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis at the bottom said, how do we know that the same as you did achas lemalo sheva lemato in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you do the same in the Heichal? So the Gemara brought a pasuk in the parasha of the Avodas Yom Kippurim, a pasuk tezayin, where it says there, v'chein yasel oyhel moed, the same should be done in the oyhel moed, which corresponds to the Heichal in the Beis Hamikdash. So that's a type of a hekesh, that since it's written v'chein yasel lo'el moed, what it says in the previous psukim, pasuk Yudalad and pasuk Tezvav, that outlines what you do in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, do the same in the Heichal. Now we have to recap. Going back in the previous Gemara, we saw that pasuk Yudalad and pasuk Tezvav, they themselves were not that clear. Pasuk Yudalad was speaking about sprinkling the blood of the bull in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the pasuk first spoke about the achas lemalo, when it says al pnei hakapoires kedma, but it didn't tell us how many lemalo. It just says al pnei hakapoires kedma, which the Gemara understands means lemalo. We don't know how many. And then after that it says v'lifnei hakapoires yaze sheva pa'omim. There should be sheva lemata. You sprinkle also downwards, and it tells us how many. It says 7. That's in pasuk Yudalid. In pasuk Tezvav, when it speaks about sprinkling of the blood of the goat, there the pasuk starts, or early on in the pasuk it says, "V'oso es domo yikasha oso ledamapor," that you're going to do the same with the blood of the goat as with the blood of the bull, which means what's supposed to happen in pasuk Tezvav is similar to what happened in pasuk Yudalid, but then the pasuk specifies again first the lemalo, vehizo oisoy ala kapoires, and the vehizo in single tense means do achas lemalo, in contrast to pasuk Yudalid where it speaks about the bull and it doesn't tell us how many to do lemalo. In pasuk Tezvav regarding the goat it does, it says once lemalo, and then the pasuk says v'lifnei hakapoires, you do some lemato. But here, in contrast to pasuk Yudalid, where it says you do 7 lemata, here regarding the goat, it just says lemata, or it says lifnei hakapoires, which we assume is lemata. It doesn't tell us how many. So we have in each pasuk one piece of information. We have the achas lemalo explicit in pasuk Tezvav. We have the sheva lemata explicit in pasuk Yudalid. And then we have in pasuk Tezvav where it says that you should do with the blood of the goat the same as the blood of the bull. So we have a hekesh and we learn one from the other, and this was discussed on Daf Nun Hey. So now the Gemara is asking a question that, so if we were to string all this together, pasuk Yudalid, pasuk Tezvav and pasuk Tezayin, Yudalid and Tezvav, they themselves are a hekesh. They're learnt out from the fact that the two psukim are next to each other, and it says in pasuk Tezvav, do as it says, make sure that what you do with the goat is similar to what it does with the bull, and then we come out with the conclusion of achas lemalo sheva lemato by the bull, and achas lemalo sheva lemato by the so'ir. And that's in pasuk Yudalid Tezvav, all inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Pasuk Tezayin is another hekesh. It says whatever you learnt about the Kodesh HaKadoshim, do the same in the Heichal. Asks the Gemara, v'chidavar alomid behekesh choizer melamid behekesh, something that in and of its own is learnt with using this rule called hekesh. Can you then use a further hekesh and draw that same limud, that same teaching, to the next place? And over here, pasuk Yudalid Tezvav in the Kodesh HaKadoshim is relying on hekesh. How can you then use hekesh to tell us what's happening in the Heichal? So answers the Gemara. The Gemara is going to have 3 answers. Number 1, Hi Heimenu v'dover acherhu v'lo have a hekesh. Pasuk Yud Daled and Tezvov doesn't really need a hekesh, because part of the information is explicit. It's explicit that you do lemalo. Explicit both in Pasuk Yud Daled and Tezvov. It's explicit that you do lemato, both in Pasuk Yud Daled and in Pasuk Tezvov. It happens to be that the number, how many times lemalo and how many times lemato, that's just a detail that was missing in the lemalo was missing by the par, and the lemata was missing by the soyer, so we use the hekesh there just to fill in the details of how many. But the essence of what it says in the psukim, that there's a lemalo and a lemato by the dam hapor, and a lemalo and lemato with dam hasoyer, you don't need a hekesh for that. So it's not called a hekesh. And since it's not called a hekesh, then you can then use a hekesh from those two psukim to pasuk tezayin and learn that whatever was done inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim was also done in the Heichal. Says the Gemara, that was all very good according to Rabbi Akiva. In the Gemara in Zvachim, where the Gemara in Zvachim Daf Nun Zayin, where the Gemara says there that lo have a hekesh, that when you learn some of the details without needing a hekesh, and just some of the details are using a hekesh, that's not called a hekesh, and therefore when you're using that to learn to another place with a hekesh, it's not called a hekesh, choyzer u'melamed behekesh. Elo leman da'omar kontra b'shmuel in the Gemara in Zvachim. Have a hekesh who says that even that's considered a hekesh, in which case, since those details have to be learned from a hekesh in Pasuk Yud Daled and Tezvov, then how are you going to understand that we're using another hekesh to learn to Pasuk Tezayin to the Heichal? So answers the Gemara, okay, the second hekesh is not teaching us anything about any of the halachas that we learnt. That means, namely, how many lemala, how many lemato. That was not the object of the second hekesh. All the second hekesh told us was, whatever's going on in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, do the same in the Heichal. It's just comparing the two places. Once you've compared the two places, you know what they did in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you'll do the same in the Heichal. A third explanation, Chutz mibifnim b'choder zimna gomar. It says, you're right. The truth is that Pasuk Yud Daled Tezvov does need a hekesh, but not entirely. It only needs the hekesh for the lemata by the soyer and the lemala of the par. But the lemata of the par, it says explicitly, Sheva lemata, v'lifnei hakaperes yaza sheva pa'omim. The lemaila of the soyer also doesn't need a hekesh. It says vehiza in singular tense. So we know that. So since as far as those details are concerned, as far as the achas lemailo by the soyer and the sheva lemata by the par doesn't need a hekesh, then those halachas I can learn to pasuk tezayin do the same in the heichal. And once the hekesh works for those halachas, we can then roll the whole thing with a hekesh and say that the sheva lemato by the soyer and the achas lemalo by the par can also be learned from that same hekesh, and we don't have an issue of a dova lomed behekesh choyzer umelamed behekesh. Continues the Gemara. Tana. So what did we see? We said that after the Kohen Gadol finished sprinkling the blood of the par and the soyer in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it was now time to sprinkle towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim, towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim towards the curtain. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learned in a brisa, Kashehu mazeh, when he sprinkles, Einoi mazeh al haparoiches. He doesn't sprinkle onto the curtain. Elo keneged hakapoires, towards the curtain, but the droplets of blood will fall on the floor. Omer Rabbi argues and says, Anira isia baroimi, I saw these curtains in Rome. V'hoyu oleo kamotipe domim, and I saw on the curtain some drops of blood, shel par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim, of the par and the soyer of the Yom Kippur. So I argue and I say that they did sprinkle onto the curtain. Says the Gemara, "V'dilma par helam dovo shel tzibur usiri avodah zara havu." We've mentioned these korbanos previously. There were other korbanos whose blood was sprinkled in a somewhat similar fashion towards the curtain, not the par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim. It's a par helam dovo shel tzibur or the usiri avodah zara. We don't need to go into the nature of those korbanos, but those are called the nisrofim, which were sprinkled that way in the Kodesh, towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the Heichal. Says the Gemara, says Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi, no, I knew that these curtains had the blood on them was from the par v'soyer of Yom Kippur. How did I know? Because when they would sprinkle the par helam dovo shel tzibur or the siri avodah zara, they wouldn't necessarily sprinkle kamatzleif, as we said, in a row, one after the other. No, over there I saw that it was sprinkled haphazardly, just all over the place. The chazar, and well, he saw that there was not haphazard. He saw that it was in a straight line. The chazar David Kasidron, he knew that was the avodah, the par and the soyer of Yom Kippurim, because the par helam dovo shel tzibur and the sir avodah zara was not done in a straight line. Now, on a similar context, says the Brayso, Tnan, we learned in the Brayso, Tnan nami legabe par helam dovo shel tzibur. Now he's discussing the par helam dovo shel tzibur, those other korbanos that the blood was sprinkled in the heichal towards the curtain. Ki hai gavna, we found the same thing in the Brayso, that kashuhu mazeh lo hoyu noigin b'pareiches. Tanakama say when they would sprinkle, they would not sprinkle onto the curtains. Vim nogu. If, however, they did, the sprinkles reached the curtains, it's okay, it's fine. Omer Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi says, Anira is sia baroimi. I saw those curtains in Rome. V'hoyu aleo kamoti peidomim shel par helam dovo shel tzibur v'usiri avodah zara. I saw that there was blood of the sprinkling of the par helam dovo and the usiri avodah zara on the curtain. So they asked, maybe what you saw was the sprinkling of the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, not the par helam davar. So he said, no. I saw that the sprinkles on the curtain were haphazard, they were not in a straight line, kamatzleif, and therefore I knew that it was the blood of the par helam davar that would reach the curtains. Now, nobody accuses Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi to having lied, that you didn't see the blood on the curtains. The Chachomim also agree, and they believed Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi that he saw the blood on the curtains. The Chachomim, however, held that might have happened by mistake. Like we said, im nogu, if it happened, it happened. But that doesn't mean that's what was supposed to happen lekatchila. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi, however, he held when he saw these droplets on the curtains, he took it for granted that it was supposed to be done that way and it was intentionally done that way. If it was in a straight line, you see 8 drops, he knew that wasn't a mistake. That was done intentionally. And also with the par helam dova, which the sprinkling was done from a further distance away, if it wouldn't have been that they intended the blood to reach the curtains, it probably wouldn't have reached the curtains. So they both agree that Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi saw the curtains. He saw a set of curtains with a line of blood, and on those curtains, could have been the same curtains, he saw that there was a few drops that were not in a straight line. So Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi assumed this was from the par v'soyer of Yom Kippurim, this was from the par helam davar, and Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi assumed that that's what was supposed to happen lekatchila. The Chachamim said it wasn't supposed to happen lekatchila, and this is discussed a little bit more in the Rishonim here. Continues the Gemara, Nis'arvu loidomim bedomim. What happens if the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat, they got mixed up together? They got poured into each other and now it's one mixture. Rashi says this happened even before he started sprinkling in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And Tosfos on Amud Beis asks, and how can this be? Because we know that the order was supposed to be, first he does the sprinkling of the blood of the bull, achas lemalo sheva lemata, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Then he goes out of the heichal and shechts the so'ir, and takes its blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and does the same. How can the two bloods get mixed up even before the blood of the bull got sprinkled? at that point, the blood of the goat wasn't supposed to be existing at all. It was supposed to be a live animal. It wasn't supposed to be shechted at all. But that's what Rashi says, and the Rishonim discuss this. So either way, you've got here the blood, a single vessel of blood, which contains in it also the blood of the bull, also the blood of the goat. What do we do now? Even those Rishonim who argue with Rashi, they say that this could have happened after they did the zrikos, so they did the hazois, more accurately, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and they got mixed into each other before doing the hazois in the Heichal. Omar Rava. Rava says, Noisen achas lemalo v'sheva lemata. Then he has to now do the sprinkling. Let's follow Rashi. He's got to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and sprinkle from the blood achas lemalo v'sheva lemata. He was supposed to do it with the blood of the bull separately and the blood of the goat separately. Now that it's all mixed up, he does it just once. He takes this mixture, he does achas lemala v'sheva lemata, v'oile lo lekan ulekan, and it counts for the goat and for the bull. That's enough. Amro kamei de Rabbi Yirmiyah. They said to Rabbi Yirmiyah what Rava ruled. Omar, and he said, Bavloi tipshoi. These people from Bovel, Mishum de Daira Ba'ara de Chashecha, because they're living in a dark land, in a low land, Omra Shmaitze de Machshachon. They're saying things which are not so accurate. Hakoyohiv lemailo de Soyer, Mikamo Matir, Mato de Paro. Because let's say that when he does the Achas Lemalo, it counts for the bull and for the goat. Then he does Sheva Lemato, it counts for the bull and the goat. But that means he did the achas lemala of the goat before doing the sheva lemata of the bull. And this doesn't go because the Torah says, V'chila mikaper es hakodesh v'es oil moed v'es hamizbeach v'hikra v'es hasoyer hachai. And we learn from there, kilo dam hapor, only after he's finished doing the hazor, the sprinkling of the blood of the bull, and only after v'acharkach kol dam hasoyer, and only then he's going to do the sprinkling of the blood of the goat. How can you possibly start doing the achas lemala of the goat before doing the sheva lemata of the bull? Elom Rabbi Yirmiyah argues with Rava, and he says you do as follows: Noisen achas lemala v'sheva lemata from this mixture, and he does it l'shem hapor, with the intention of doing the hazoyis that are supposed to be associated to the blood of the bull, and he has that in mind. And then he does the same thing again from the same mixture, achas lemala v'sheva lemata, but this time he does it l'shem hasoyer, having in mind the goat. And then you've got the achas lemala sheva lemata of the bull, and afterwards you've got the achas lemala v'sheva lemata of the goat. Continues the Gemara, the next case. Nis'arvu loy domim bedomim b'matonos achronos. What happens if after he did the achas lemala of the bull, before he did the sheva lemata of the bull, the blood of the goats got mixed up into it? What do we do? So Sovar of Papa Kamei Rava. So if Papa assumed, and he said in front of Rava Lemeimar, he wanted to say, No yisein sheva lemata l'shem par u'l'shem soyer. You should do the sheva lemata and have in mind both the par and the soyer, similar to what Rava said before, when the bloods got mixed in before they did any hazois. then Rava said, do the achas lemala and have in mind both, do the sheva lemata, have in mind both. If Papa said to Rava, in this case, he'll do the sheva lemata and have in mind both, and then achas lemala l'shem soyer, and then he'll do an achas lemala and have in mind the goat. Because the achas lemala of the bull he did before he got mixed up. All that's missing now is the achas lemala of the goat. He'll do that after the sheva lemata. Omar li Rava. Rava responded, Ad hashta korulon, they called us, and this was referring to Rav Yirmiyah, they used to call us tipshoi, because we're from Bovel, used to call us that we're tipshim, we're not, we're fools. V'hashta, now they're going to call us, if you're going to say this, Rav Papa, they're going to call us tipshoi, the fools of the fools. They're going to say that we're teaching things and we haven't even learnt. Because if you do that, says Rava to Papa, then you will have done the sheva lemata of the soyer before doing the achas lemala of the soyer. You can't do that. The Torah says 10 lemala, v'achar kach lemata. In both the psukim we mentioned before, Pasuk Yudalad and Pasuk Tezvav, it mentions the lemala before the lemata. Elo Omar Rava says what you have to do in that case is Noisan Sheva lemata l'shem par. You do the 7 lemata and you only have in mind l'shem par. And then you do achas l'mayla v'sheva lemata, having in mind exclusively the soir. Continues the Gemara, the next case. Nis'arvu loy koisois b'koisois. What happens if you had the vessel holding the blood of the bull and the vessel holding the blood of the goat, and now they got confused, and he doesn't know which one is the blood of the bull, which one is the blood of the goat? What's he going to do? And as we said before, it's got to go in order. You have to do the bull before doing the goat. You have to have the achas lemala before the sheva lemata. So what do? Says the Gemara, noisein, he does achas lemala sheva lemata from one of the vessels. V'choizer v'noisen, and then he does the same thing with the other vessel. And then v'choizer v'noisen, and then he does it again with the original one. Shloisha pomim, he does 3 times. 1, 2, 1. So now whichever way around you hold it, it's okay. If the first one was the bull, then that's okay. That was supposed to be first. The second one was the goat, that's fine. And the third one will just be unnecessary. If the first one was the goat, then that doesn't work because you have to finish with the bull first. So the second one will be the bull, and then the third one will be the goat. And then again, that will be fine. Continues the Gemara. Next case. Miktsas domim nis'arvuloi. What happens if part of the blood of the bull and part of the blood of the goat got poured into a third vessel? So now you have vessel number 1 with the blood of the bull, vessel number 2 with the blood of the goat, and vessel number 3 with a little bit of blood of the bull and a little bit of blood of the goat. So what's the question? That means umiktsas domim nis'arvuloi. A little bit of the blood of each of those animals got mixed up in a third vessel, or mixas domim lo nis'arvuloi, and part of the blood didn't get mixed up. Like we said, you've got 3 containers now. Pshita, it's clear, ki yohiv, when you do the achas lemalos and sheva lematos, mivadoin yohiv. When you need to do the hazois of the bull, you do it from the one that you're 100% sure is exclusively the blood of the bull. And when it comes to doing the achas lemalo sheva lemato for the goat, you take the blood which is exclusively for the, that you know it's from the goat. The question is, miu hanoch shirayim. The question is this third container, which has a little bit of blood of the bull, a little bit of blood of the goat, and they got mixed up before the avoida of the achas lemalo sheva lemata of the blood of the bull and the goat was done. The question is, do we consider this hanoch, this blood, shirayim, as being a remainder of blood that the avoida had been done, which is true. This is blood that came from the animals, and they're done the avoida with part of the blood of the animals, the part that did not get mixed up, and this is the remainder. And what's the halacha? When the halacha by shirayim is hanoch shirayim havu, we learn from psukim that the remaining blood, we're going to learn about it later on, the remaining blood is going to get poured onto the base of the mizbeach, the outside, the big mizbeach. That would be one way of looking at it. Or Dilmo, maybe dechuyin hava, they've been rejected. Va'ozli la'oma, and once they've become rejected, why are they rejected? Because normally what happens with remainders with shirayim is that the blood of the shirayim was with the blood that the avodah was done to. The avodah was done, so to speak, from all the blood, and then whatever's left over is called shirayim. Over here, when the avodah was done, achas lemalo sheva lemata, that blood had already been separated. So it could be, the way we view it, that it's called dichui, it's been rejected from the avodah, and then ozli le'oma, and then it just gets poured away into the stream, the canal that was going through the azara. They would just pour it into there, and it was like posel, and you couldn't put it onto the yesoid of the mizbeach. That was the question of the Gemara. Omer of Papa. Rav Papa says, Afilu leman de Omar, and we're going to learn about this soon, but there's a machleikas, if kois echod oise chaveiroi shirayim. What happens if you have a regular korban, and a person received the blood in 2 vessels, and he does the Zrikas Adam with one of the 2. What's the status of the other one? It's the same sort of question. That normally one receives all the blood, and one does the Zrika with that blood, and whatever's left has the din of Shirayim. But what happens if he's got 2 kaisos, which means that, so to speak, the Shirayim was separated even before the Avodah was done? So it's going to be a machlokes later. Rav Papa says that even according to the opinion that says that when you receive the blood in two containers, that it's still okay, it's considered shirayim, it's not considered dochu, it's not considered rejected, and it has the halachas of shirayim. Hanamila, that's only true because when you receive the blood with both, theoretically you could have done the Zrikas Adam with any of them. They are both able to be used for the Avodah. And therefore, there's one opinion that says, even if they were separated before the Avodah was done, it's still called Shirayim. Aval hai, but in this case, with the bull's blood, with the goat's blood, you can't use that blood. It's not completely accurate, you can't use it at all, but it's definitely not the preferred way of using it. As we said before, that you should, the blood you're going to use for the achas lemala sheva lemata is going to be from the vadoim, from those 2 vessels which are not mixed together. And since we do not allow him to use this mixed up blood for the avodah, it's even worse than a case of a regular korban where the Kabbalah Saddam was done in 2 kelim, and therefore everybody will agree it does not have the din of Shirayim. That's what Rav Papa suggested. Amalei Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. Rav Huna said to Rav Papa, Adarab, on the contrary, I'm saying the other way around. Even if in another case, where a person received the blood in 2 containers, there that we say it's considered rejected, because you did the avodah with one and not with the other, it could be that Hanamili, that maybe that's only true the Dachya B'Yadayim, where you did something to reject this blood. You took this blood in a different vessel, so to speak, saying this blood I'm not using, and I'm only using the other blood for the Avodah. That's called rejection. But in our case here, where he wasn't Dachya B'Yadayim, it's not as if he chose not to use it. Just it happens to be that the 2 bloods are mixed together, and therefore the halach is you shouldn't use it. But it's not as if he chose not to use it. Maybe in that case everybody agrees it does have the status of Shirayim, and it's not considered rejected. And therefore everybody will agree that it's considered Shirayim. So we're back to the question that we have. We had Rav Papa who said it one way, Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua who said it the other way. Now, where did we find this machlokes, whether a regular korban, where one receives the blood in 2 containers, and then one does the zrika with one of them, is it called shirayim? Is the other one called shirayim, or is the other one called dochui? The Tanya we learned in a brayso, Masechet Zvachim, that l'mayla hu oimer, regarding the chatos of the so'ir of the nosi, it says in the pasuk, ve'es domoy yishpeich al yisoid hamizbeach, that you should pour the remainder, the shirayim of the blood, you should put it onto the yisoid of the mizbeach, onto the base of the lower step, the base of the mizbeach. And there it doesn't say kol, it doesn't say ve'es kol domo yishafech, make sure that all the remaining blood gets poured onto the base. It doesn't say that. It says domo yishpeich, you should pour the blood. Ulamata hu oimer, and elsewhere it says in the pasuk regarding a regular chatos yochid by the shirayim. There it says, what do you do with the leftover blood? It says in the pasuk, ve'es kol dama yishpeich el yisoid hamizbeach. All the blood of the chatos, all the remaining blood, should be poured onto the yisoid hamizbeach. So the brayso says, minayin lechatos shekibel dama ba'arba koisis. What happens if it's talking about chatos, and he received the blood in 4 separate containers instead of just 1? And we know that with a chatos, you have to apply the blood on all 4 corners of the mizbeach. So v'nosan mizeh achas or mizeh achas, and he takes a different one of the vessels, and he does the Zrikas Adam, he applies the blood onto the Mizbeach on each corner of the Mizbeach from a different vessel. Then Shekulam Nishbachim Liyisoid. Then all the remaining blood gets put onto the Yisoid. How do we know that? Talmud Lema, it says in that second pasuk, Ve'es kol doma yishpoich. All the remaining blood gets put onto the Mizbeach. Yochel afilu nosan arba matonis me'achas mehem. What happens if you apply the blood on all four corners of the Mizbeach from one of the four containers you received the blood in, and the other three containers, they were just not used? How do you know that even then the blood goes onto the Mizbeach? Now, how do you know that it doesn't? I may have thought that even then it goes onto the Mizbeach. Talmud Lema, no. It doesn't say all the blood has to go onto the Yisoid. Some of the blood. When would you not put the blood on the Mizbeach? In this case, when you have a container of blood that was not used at all for any avodah, then in that case it does not go onto the Yisoid. Talmud Lema v'zdama yishpech hu nishbach liyisoid, that the container that you used to apply the blood onto the Mizbeach goes onto the Yisoid. V'hein, and the other three containers that were not used, nishbachim la'oma, they get thrown out to the water stream going through the Azara. That was the Tanakama in the Brisa. Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon Omer, he argues and he says, Minayin lechatos shekibel doma ba'arba koises v'nosan arba matonis me'echod mehem shekulam nishbachim liyisoid. How do you know that if you did all four applications of blood from only one of these containers, how do you know that all the other three containers go to the Yisoid? Talmud Lema says in the pasuk, Ve'es kol doma yishpoich. So Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon says that from the pasuk, Ve'es kol doma yishpoich, says that even if you only did the avodah with one of the containers, the other three also go onto the Yisoid HaMizbeach. So you see here clearly that there's a machlekes tanoim that the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon, whether if you received the blood in more than one container and you did the avodah with just one of them, what's the status of the other one? And then we had the machlekes before between Rav Papa and Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua, how that compares to a case not where you've got two containers of blood that you could have theoretically used either one and you chose to just use one, but what happens in a case where the blood, part of the blood of the bull, part of the blood of the goat got mixed into a third container and now we cannot use that. How does it compare with that machlekes? That's what we saw before. Now the Gemara is asking, according to Rabbi Eliezer Shimon, who says that you learn from the pasuk of Es kol doma yishpoich, that even when all the avodah was done with just one of the containers of blood, the other three are considered shirayim and not considered dochui. The question is, what's he going to do with the pasuk of Ve'es doma yishpoich that seems to say that only part of the blood gets put onto the Mizbeach, not the rest? What's it coming to exclude? According to the Tanakama, it excludes exactly such a case, where you only used one of the containers. According to Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon, in that case it's also called shirayim, and it goes on the Yisoid. So in what case does it not go on the Yisoid? Hoksiv es doma yishpoich, answers the Gemara Amar Rashi, le'me'utei shirayim shebetzavar behema, that the leftover blood in the neck of the animal, that doesn't go to the Yisoid HaMizbeach. If it wasn't received at the time in the Kli, it wasn't part of the Kabbalah Sadam, then that blood does not get put on the Mizbeach, it just gets poured out and washed away. Continues the Gemara. What's the next part of the Avodah? The Kohen Gadol has done the Achas Lemalo Sheva Lemata with the blood of the bull in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And then he's done the same with the blood of the goat in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And then he's done the same with the blood of the bull in the Heichal. And then he's done the same with the blood of the soyer in the Heichal. What does he do now? The next part of the Avodah is that we mix the two bloods together. What does he do? Ira, he pours the dama par, the blood of the bull that's left in the container, l'toich dama soyer, into the vessel that's holding the blood of the goat. And then he pours it back in order that it should be well mixed. Says the Gemara. When did they do this? It seems in the Mishnah that the Kohen Gadol did this before applying the blood onto the Mizbeach HaPnimi. But that seems to be a machlekes. There's actually going to be a machlekes whether the blood of the bull and the goat were mixed before they were applied to the Mizbeach HaPnimi or afterwards. The one opinion says, as in our Mishnah, they mixed it before, and they did a single application on the Mizbeach HaPnimi that we'll learn about later, and that applied to both. Or no, they kept them separate, and they first did the application of the bull's blood, and then the blood of the goat, and only then they mixed up the bloods before pouring it onto the Yesod HaMizbeach. So that's going to be a machlekes. Says the Gemara, Tanan, our Mishnah is command Oma Ma'arvin, is following the opinion that says that they were Ma'arvin lekronis. The kronis, literal translation is the horns. It means the corners of the inner Mizbeach. Both Mizbechis had corners protruding upwards, like horn-like corners, and the corners of the Mizbeach. And that's where the blood was applied. We'll learn later exactly the details. And so this Mishnah is learning, our Mishnah is learning that they would mix the bloods before applying the blood onto the corners of the Mizbeach Hazov, the Mizbeach inside the Heichal. De'itmar. Because we learned Rabbi Yashia of Rabbi Yonason. There was actually Machlekes Rabbi Yashia and Rabbi Yonason. At this point we don't know who said what, but Chad Omar, one of them said Ma'arvin, that you mix the bloods before you apply it to the Mizbeach, to the Karnis HaMizbeach. V'chad Omar, the other opinion says, Ein Ma'arvin, you do not mix it, lekronis, before applying it to the corners of the inner Mizbeach. The Gemara is going to try and bring proof. This time I'll bring proof. The Rabbi Yashia who the Omar, it's Rabbi Yashia actually who says the Ma'arvin. And our Mishnah is following that opinion of Rabbi Yashia, that they would mix the bloods before applying it to the corners of the Mizbeach. The Omar. Because there's another machlekes. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says, Ish asher yekalel es oviv ve'es imoy. A person who curses chas v'shalom his father and his mother, then it's a serious avera and he gets seriously punished. The question is, what happens? Does he, in order to get that severe punishment, does he have to have cursed his father and his mother, or any one of the two? So that's going to be a machlekes. And this is not the machlekes lemaisa, because everybody says that any one of them is enough. The question is, was there ever a point where we assumed that you're only chayev if you curse them both, and you need a special pasuk to say no, even if you just curse any one of them? So we're going to see now that Rabbi Yashia says that from the words that Yikalil es oviv v'es imoy, the vov, the and, that connects oviv and imoy actually means you have to curse them both. And that's why, according to Rabbi Yashia, there's a separate pasuk that tells us, no, don't learn it that way. And even though vov normally means not either or, but both, in this case it doesn't, because of another pasuk. That was Rabbi Yashia. And Rabbi Yonason, he argues and says that the Vav never connected the two and always ever meant one or the other. So we see, so the Gemara is saying now, this time I've got proof, because in our Pasuk, what we're talking about, in our Sugya here, the Pasuk says that V'lokach midam hapor, umidam hasoir, v'nosan al karnis hamizbeach soviv. You take the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat, and you put it on the corners of the Mizbeach. The question is, does it mean you take one on its own and then another on its own? Or does the Vov, umidam hasoir, the Vov of umidam mean both together? So according to Rabbi Yashia, it would mean both together, like it does by someone who curses their parents. According to Rabbi Yonason, the Vov never means both together. So the Gemara says that Tistayim is probable the Rabbi Yeshaya the Omar Ma'arvin. It's Rabbi Yeshaya who says that you mix the bloods before. The Omar, because he says regarding cursing of the parents, Afal Gav Delo Iksiv Yachtov, even though it doesn't say explicitly Yachtov that you have to curse them both together, Commander Siv Yachtov Dom. It's as if it says, because of the Vov that connects the two, it's as if it says explicitly that you curse them both together. Says the Gemara, no. Afilatemi Rabbi Yonason. It could even be Rabbi Yonason in that Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Vav, that Rabbi Yonason says that the Vav does not connect them. Nonetheless, it could be that over here he'll agree that the Vav, well, we'll soon see it's not the Vav, but Rabbi Yonason is going to agree that in this case you mix the bloods together before applying them onto the Mizbeach. Why would that be true? If by V'kalil Oviv, Yikalil es Oviv v'es imoy, it doesn't mean both. Why over here, when it says V'lokach midam apor umidam masoir, would it mean both together? Shani Hacha says the Gemara here is different, because it says explicitly in the pasuk V'chiper Aaron al Karnaisov, that Aaron HaKohen gets atoned on the corners of this Mizbeach, achas b'shana. Once a year, midam chatas hakipurim, achas b'shana, yechaper olav l'doreisechem kodesh kadoshim ul Hashem. Only once a year the blood is applied. If it's only applied once a year, it must be you don't do it once for the bull, once for the goat. It must be you mix the bloods before. We have a separate pasuk, and therefore our Mishnah could follow either Rabbi Yeshaya's understanding or Rabbi Yonasan. Says the Gemara, Tanya deloi kashnuya. I'm now going to bring you a brisa that says not like you just said now. I'm going to bring you a brisa that's going to prove that it's actually Rabbi Yeshaya who says that ma'arvin. It's not Rabbi Yonasan who says ma'arvin. Where what does it say in the brisa? The brisa brings that pasuk, Velokach midam hapor umidam hasoyer sheyu ma'arovin. They have to be mixed. It has to be mixed before you apply them. Divi Rabbi Yeshaya. You see explicitly, as Rabbi Yeshaya says, that ma'arvin, you have to mix them before you put it on the mizbeach. Rabbi Yonasan Omar, he says that you apply the blood of the bull separately and you apply the blood of the goat separately. So you see clearly, like we thought initially, Rabbi Yeshaya is the opinion that says ma'arvin, and Rabbi Yonasan is the opinion that says loy ma'arvin. Omar lo Rabbi Yeshaya. Rabbi Yeshaya asked Rabbi Yonasan, how can you, Rabbi Yonasan, say that you apply the blood of each one separately? Does it not say in the pasuk we mentioned before that achas bashono, just once a year you get atoned by applying the blood onto this mizbeach? So, and from here it seems that the reason Rabbi Yeshaya says you mix the two is from achas, a little bit different to what we learnt before, that Rabbi Yeshaya learns, as he does in Sanhedrin regarding the cursing of parents, that it's the Vav that connects the two. So it's an issue the Mefarashim discuss it here. But it says, V'aloi kvar nema achas. Omar Rabbi Yonasan, Rabbi Yonasan says no. V'aloi kvar nemar midam hapor umidam hasoyer. Rabbi Yonasan says, it says explicitly, you apply the blood of the bull and you apply the blood of the goat, each one separately, not together. Im kain Lomo nemar achas. According to you, Rabbi Yonasan, that you read midam hapor, midam hasoyer, that each one is applied separately, then why would it say achas bashana? Only once a year you get atoned. Answers the Gemara, says Rabbi Yonasan, achas loy malacha achas v'lo ishtayim midam hapor, achas v'lo ishtayim midam hasoyer. To tell us that only once a year you get atoned with the blood of a bull, and only once a year you get atoned with the blood of a goat. Not twice a year with a bull, or twice a year with a goat. That means the once, the achas bashana, is only telling us that the bull and the goat, each one is only done once, not twice. But it's not telling us that there's only ever one korban which we get atoned for in this way, as Rabbi Yeshaya does, that he says from the achas means that you only apply the blood once, and according to Rabbi Yeshaya that must mean that you mix the bloods before applying them. Tanya Idoch, another brisa, which is similar just without names, it says V'lokach midam hapor midam hasoyer. From what do we see from here? Sheyu mu'rovin zeh b'zeh, that they should be mixed together. Midam hapor umidam hachatos, midam hasoyer, mix the two together and apply them to the mizbeach after they've been mixed. What makes you think that you mix the two together before applying it? Maybe you apply each of the bloods separately. Talmud Loima, like we said before, achas. It says achas b'shana, you only apply the blood once a year, it must be it's been mixed before. Which is the opinion of Stoma Rabbi Yeshaya. The Gemara assumes that anonymous brisa is the Rabbi Yeshaya of the previous brisa that says that from achas you learn that you mix the bloods before. So the conclusion will be that we saw at the beginning there was a machlokes, the Itmar, Rabbi Shai, Rabbi Yonasan, there was a machlokes, Chad Omar Ma'arvin, Chad Omar Ein Ma'arvin, and our Mishnah is clearly following the opinion that says Ma'arvin. It's now clear to us, like the Gemara assumed at the beginning, that our Mishnah is following the opinion of Rabbi Shai and not Rabbi Yashia, and not the opinion of Rabbi Yonasan. And in Yitzchok in the next year, we're going to continue from here.